Great. Thank you, Joanne. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kimberly Terry. I am the Graduate Program Administrator here for the Department of Psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. And the topic that we're going to discuss is on classes, research, funding, kind of what it looks like in general in a PhD program. And I'm going to let our fabulous panelists, Christine and Anya, introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Christine Coughlin. I am a postdoc at UT Austin, and I did my graduate PhD program at the University of California in Davis. My research interests are broadly in neurocognitive development, but I've also done a little bit of social research. And so I have a lot of experience with grad school, and then also a little bit of experience about what happens after you get your graduate degree. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Aina, and I'm a third year, soon to be third year, I suppose, graduate student. I'm in the experimental psychology program. More specifically, I work in the cognitive area, but also a lot of the work that we do in the lab is also developmental. I'm very interested in normativity, conformity, and how that varies, rule following and norm following across cultures. And I'm also an international student from Budapest, Hungary. So if there's any questions about international student, what are kind of the differences or maybe challenges, I'm also happy to answer those questions.
Great. So I will toss it out to both of you in terms of what you'd like to discuss. Maybe we can just start off talking a little bit about sort of research and how you went about choosing the lab that you joined when you were in graduate school.
Okay, maybe I can start. It's, I guess, more fresh. So I was just reading articles, like journal, like articles, and that's how I kind of stumbled upon my current advisor. So one thing that's kind of different from undergrad is that you want to look into more your advisor, like more of faculty's work rather than the name or the prestige of the university. And it's much more important to find someone that your research interest kind of aligns with. For me, coming from a different culture and also just kind of been focused more on, I also majored in anthropology. So like the cultural context and aspect was very important for me. So I was looking for a lab that did a lot of cross-cultural work. And that's kind of basically how I found my current advisor.
Before I answer, is my internet, is a lag here? Oh, all right.
Can you hear us, Christine?
I can now. I'm going to jump right back on. I think my internet is acting up a little bit, and I'm just going to switch to a different network really quickly.
Okay, no problem. Anya, how many programs did you apply to when you were thinking about graduate school?
Yeah, I think I might have applied to a little too many. I think I applied around 8 to 10 programs, which I would say is too, like for undergrad, that's fine. But I think for graduate school, that might be going a little overboard because I think even I myself didn't fully understand the importance of research fit. And I applied to a lot of programs that were just not the best fit for my interest. And also considering location and funding and all of these other aspects, they were not really the best fit. So I would recommend to apply to smaller, but also for me, for visa implications, it was important to get into any program. So I think I kind of went with applying to more just for the sake of like, okay, hopefully I'll get something. But I think if you're in a more privileged position, then I would encourage to like just apply a few programs and be fully invested in those and very excited to go into any of those potential programs. So I think even applying to as little as maybe 3 programs could be a good choice.
I'm back. Is that better for the connection? Okay, yes, great. Perfect. Wonderful. So I'll just jump back to kind of what led me to my current lab and in grad school and kind of what influenced my my decision to apply for certain labs. So I took a little bit of a gap after I did my undergraduate studies. I was pre-med originally, and after deciding not to go the medical school route, I was a little bit uncertain about what I wanted to do. So I took a few years and worked in various labs, and that's kind of how I found my passion for experimental psychology, got some hands-on experience. So it wasn't, right out of grad school or right out of undergrad that I was looking for a lab. But once I kind of found my passion and my interests, it was a little bit easier. And so once I was working, I worked with children with autism. I worked in a memory research lab, looking at Alzheimer's disease, and that kind of helped me kind of focus my interests. And once I knew where I really wanted to go, I started researching different labs whose interests align with my own. And that was really important. As Anya was saying, you really want to find a good research fit, a good fit for your interests, because you're going to be dedicating a lot of time and resources, and you want to be doing something that excites you. And also, a lot of the programs are a mentorship model program. And so that's something to look into. If it's a mentorship program, you want to find someone who's also interested in you. You're kind of applying to the program broadly, but you're also usually going to be asked, are you interested in working with a specific individual or a few specific individuals? And so when I was doing my research, I was really looking at the program broadly, but also the faculty within that program, and were there specific faculty whose interests aligned with my own. And I found I kind of made a long list of programs, and then I kind of made a shorter list. I think I applied to about 10 programs. It is extremely competitive. And so, like Anya said, you don't want to apply for programs that you're not interested in. That's not going to be good for anyone. You want to find programs whose faculty align with your interests, and whose course requirements and those requirements align with your eventual goals. But in my instance, I found like it was better to kind of apply broadly when I did find those programs, because it is so competitive. It does get expensive, but there can be waivers if you have financial needs and you could prove that. And so, yeah, that's how I went about it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so as you can see, there's already kind of two sort of different approaches. So everybody has kind of their own path to grad school and what's going to maybe work best for them. But I do think the important takeaway is that you have really thought about it, and that you've actually had some experience with research and finding out what it is you really enjoy doing, because graduate programs at this level are 5 to 6 years. So that's a good chunk of your life. So you want to make sure that it's something that you enjoy. I know there was questions that we were sent about classes, coursework. Maybe Oina, you can start off, since you're kind of in the process of finishing up a lot of your required courses, but maybe we could talk a little bit about how courses are different from undergrad, and sort of how you go about selecting courses.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually very flexible, and kind of you can make your own, choose your own adventure type of things. There's only a very few, very much like required core courses. So I'm actually looking at the cheat sheet, but there is like 3 big areas from which you have to take 3 courses, but actually 4 areas, but you have to take 3 of these courses. So you have to take from at least 3 of these like topics, right? So we have the cognitive or neuropsychology, then we have more social psychology, and then more cognition. So you have to take some of these core requirements, but you have to take 2 statistical courses. But I think, and yeah, correct me anyone if I'm wrong, but I think the rest is more just electives. So basically you get to decide within the psychology department, but sometimes you can also I took a data visualization course from anthropology last semester. So you can also kind of branch out and take from other departments. But basically you have to be enrolled for 9 credit hours during the academic year, so the fall and the spring, which usually is about 3 courses. And then over the summer, you also have to be enrolled in 1 course, which will be, I think that's 3 credits, right? But a lot of these courses are kind of just placeholders. So you can take courses that are called research, which means that you will be just focusing on your own research or the lab that you're working in. So they're kind of just show up as a course, but you're not attending to. And even the courses that you're attending to are very different from undergrad. First of all, they are so much smaller, which for me, I went to a small undergrad institution, so it wasn't that different, but they are really small. So I have taken a language development course that had, I think, 7 students in it. So it's incredibly personal. There are a lot of discussions, a lot of questions you can ask there. And you will be reading a lot more academic papers and journal articles than you might have read during your undergrad courses. But in general, I think they are also more open. So there will be like papers that you might be writing up, but it's not so much, at least in the experimental psychology. I think clinical is probably a little bit different and more test-based, but we don't really have as many like tests or like memorization. It's more about like understanding the research project and reading critically and building up your lit review and kind of your expertise within that specific field that you're heading into. And then I think we're going to talk about it, but there's also like, usually you would be a teaching assistant in most of these semesters. So you will have some work and some of your time will be dedicated for that as well. So you have to consider that classes are not the only thing that you're doing in grad school.
I'm trying to think if I have anything to add. You covered it so nicely. Yeah, I think it is like, I just want to kind of underscore the fact that it is kind of a choose your own adventure. It's very flexible and it's designed to be flexible so that you get expertise that aligns with your research interests. And so a lot of times when I was picking my course load, I was speaking with my advisor. There were core classes, as Anya mentioned, you're going to take your statistical courses, and that's just a requirement. There are certain skills that you're going to need regardless of where you're focusing your research. But then there is this built-in flexibility that allows you to really build the knowledge and expertise that aligns most closely with your specific research interests. And I found that to be extremely fun and extremely rewarding because whereas in undergraduate studies, I was sometimes studying topics that I wasn't as interested in. In graduate school, you really are studying topics that are extremely interesting to you. It is a lot more intimate. It's a lot smaller. You're having interesting discussions. And I found it to be really engaging and fun. And you're not taking as many courses as well. So you really get to dive in. Yeah, I think that's all I can add.
And I think that also, you both kind of touched on this a little bit, in that graduate life is very different from the undergraduate world in terms of the types of courses, how a course is structured, and then you have the added component of research. How much of your day would you say you spend actively working on research?
I think especially over the summer, it's the majority. And then even over like the academic year, like at least half of my time is spent on research, because that is really like more important. And sometimes there are more urgent tasks for TAing and things like that. That's easy to get distracted with, but you still want to spend like at least half or a little over half of your time on research, because that's how you're building your publications, your dissertations, or your thesis work. So that is really the most important thing.
I completely agree. You really want to make sure that you're not blocking off too many hours for coursework, because your research is really important. And so especially when you're first entering graduate school, I think it could be really enticing to see all these interesting courses and want to enroll in as many as possible. But I really caution against that, because research is so important. And especially your first semester in graduate school, you really want to kind of work out that balance. And so while your coursework is really important and it's going to help you build your expertise, your research is critical. And you really want to be able to ensure that you have time in your schedule to focus on that research, at least 50%. I'd say I was probably spending over that. And so you really want to make sure that you have time to focus on your research. And that can be the struggle sometimes, to balance focusing on your research while taking your coursework and really doing well in that. And then also some of you will be TAing as well. And so you really want to kind of find that balance while also finding the balance for your own mental health and well-being as well, which can be a struggle. So talk to your advisor, talk to your peers and your program advisor. They'll help you work that out.
So we've mentioned funding, and I know there were questions about funding in graduate school, how that works. Christine and Oine, can you tell us a little bit about maybe the types of funding that you had, Christine, and what you've experienced here at UT Oina, and then maybe how you even went about looking at the programs that you applied to when you were applying to grad school. Was funding something that you were paying attention to back then?
Mm-hmm. Christine, do you want to go first?
Sure. So the two major types of funding usually are either come through a TA-ship or an RA-ship. So a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. The TA-ship involves being a TA in a course. And so usually programs will have different requirements for how many hours you're required to dedicate towards that TA-ship, and that's meant to kind of protect your time, but also ensure that you're giving your time. And usually that involves just assisting with a course that is in the psychology department or a similar department that's related to your interests. I found TA-ships to be really rewarding. You get some training and mentorship, and you get some kind of teaching experience as well. Usually you can guest lecture, but a lot of your time, which I know will be spent in later talk sessions, is spent grading, office hours, that sort of stuff. And that's a major source of funding. Another means of funding is a research assistantship. And that is awesome when you can have that, because usually that frees up your time, and that's just, you're being paid to do research. And so you're getting your funding through your research activities. So with the TA-ship, you're doing your research activities and you're also helping teach. You're getting that additional experience. But with the research assistantship, you're just doing your research activities. You don't have the additional TA requirements. They're both valuable. Usually I did a lot of TAing early in grad school, and then later on when I was really working on my dissertation and needing more time, that's when I was able to get additional funding for a research assistantship. Usually it's a combination of both. It depends on the program and it depends on the lab and how much funding they have. So that is something that when I was applying for graduate schools, usually the best place I found is the initial best place is the program's website. If it's an informative website, you can usually find some information about funding opportunities and how many years you're guaranteed funding. That's another thing to look for as well. And I know our Psych2022 program does a great job of funding opportunities, and that's something you can find on the website, but that's something you definitely want to look at. And then finally, one last note is there are some, this is outside of the program itself, but you can apply for national funding and research awards and that sort of thing. And so some students will apply for grants or training grants and stuff like that. And that's another opportunity for funding where you kind of get your own funding and you come in with that funding, and that gives you a lot of flexibility as well. And that's something I didn't know when I first joined my lab, but it's something that I quickly learned, and that's something that your PI or your advisor can also kind of talk to you about.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much sums it up. I think one thing that is to consider is that once you get accepted or get an offer to some of these programs, you will also have an offer letter. So in that letter, they will say how much of your funding is guaranteed. And what was really nice about UT's psychology program is that they guaranteed a TA opportunity for the entire 5 year of the program. So I knew that even if I don't get any other additional funding, which is, always uncertain whether you get it, it's extremely competitive. And also some not all international students are not eligible to any national funding. So we have to look for other like private companies or other international resources. So it was very important for me to know that I had this sort of safety net of like, at least I can TA. So I do have some sort of stipend throughout my program. And yeah, I've actually TA'd the entire time so far. I think only my very first semester, I was on a GRA-ship, which was from my advisor. So she had a bigger grant and she was able to fund me for doing research for that project, and I didn't have to teach that time. But I also find it very rewarding, and I actually will be taking a teaching course in the fall. So you can also become an AI, which is a assistant instructor, I think it stands for, right? And then you can actually start teaching your own course, which is a little bit higher paid, and of course a much better experience if you're interested in going into teaching and that aspect of academia, then that's a great way to get experience and exposure.
I think that's a great point. If you are interested in going into a teaching role, then you really do want to get that experience, and that's going to help you get that job.
There's a
Another
question.
So there is a question. So do you receive a stipend on top of the TA and RA shifts, or does the stipend come from those jobs? So basically the stipends are the ones that come from those jobs. And if I may clarify one thing, usually with those stipends, your tuition is covered, right? So the university or the department will cover your tuition. So at the end of the day, you could barely get by. If you like eating ramen a lot, then
it's okay. You just have to be smart. A lot of cooking, but you can get by. I think actually UT's stipend is, I find it to be more competitive than some other universities' stipends. Like, for sure. And I'm really lucky because I was fully funded for my undergrad, so I don't have any student loans. But I think if you don't have any other like extra payments just for your basic necessities, you can definitely cover those with the stipend, and that does come from your TA ship or your RA ship. So if you don't apply for TA ship in a semester, which you could, then you have to have some sort of other income that is not from the university. So that's an important point. And also it comes with insurance. I'm sure this will be covered maybe in another, but I think that's also a very important thing to keep in mind, that this also comes with insurance.
Great. What else would
Can I
you?
ask a quick question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this varies between programs, but is funding, like RA funding, for example, is that determined at the departmental level? So is that standard across labs, or does it depend on the PI and their individual funding?
It does depend on the PI and their individual funding. So that's a great question to ask when you're talking with faculty, when maybe you go to visit a program and you're finding out more about their research and how their lab operates. You can talk about how do they typically fund their students. And so that'll give you a good idea of what that looks like in their lab. It's going to vary by program. It's going to vary by faculty even. And just with the nature of grants, it can vary from year to year what grant funding they have available for what particular project that they're working on. So that's something to keep in mind when you are looking at programs and you're talking with grad students. I strongly recommend that you reach out to current grad students. They're going to be your best source of on the ground information. And so definitely reach out and feel free to ask about funding. It's an important topic, and it's something that it is okay to ask about.
Yeah, and also just adding on to that, what I found was a really useful question to ask grad students is their living situation, whether they have roommates or they are able to afford to live by themselves, because that will be a pretty good way to describe or to understand how much that stipend really means in a particular city that you're thinking of moving to.
Are there any other questions that anyone wants to throw out? Christine and Moina, can you tell us what you, maybe one or two things even that you wish you had known when you were applying to graduate school? Or maybe you would have done differently if you, looking back on it now?
I think when applying to graduate school, I think I would have asked more questions. I think I was a first-gen student, and I was really self-conscious about asking for information. And I think everyone expects it, and it's only going to make your life easier. And so I think I would have definitely been more open about asking the program's questions, when I went through the interview process, asking the lab questions, they expect you to ask questions. You want to do it in a polite way, of course, but they want to see that you're interested, and they expect those kinds of questions. So asking about, like we were just talking about funding, I was a little bit hesitant to ask about that. And that's something that they expect you to ask about, asking about mentorship styles. How do you see us interacting? What is your ideal? What kind of mentor are you? What's your ideal setting? Because you really want to find a good fit, and that's so important. And I lucked out. I didn't ask some of those questions and I found a good fit, but I've heard stories where other people weren't as lucky. And so I think that's a big thing, being comfortable asking for that information. Another thing I did learn, but that I kind of learned a little bit later in the game, is that you really want to foster relationships and reach out to potential mentors early in the process. That can save you a lot of time. And so a lot of times, you as you're looking at faculty members that you're particularly interested in working for, a lot of times if they have a personal website or faculty website, they might actually list, I am interested in accepting graduate students for this upcoming cycle, or I am not. And that can save you a ton of time, because you don't want to, first of all, you don't want to invest the time reaching out to someone if they're not accepting graduate students. And second of all, if you do apply for a program that you're very interested in, that has several faculty members that you'd be interested in working with, if you list 2 people who aren't accepting graduate students, then in the next year, your chances of getting admitted to that program are a lot slimmer. And that can be unfortunate if there are several faculty members that you would be excited and interested in working with. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think those are really important. I actually ended up emailing a lot of faculty in the fall, like I want to say the September of the year I was applying. And I got back some emails where they said like, yeah, it sounds, your research interest sounds good, but I am not taking graduate students this semester or this coming year. So that's definitely very important. And I had no idea that you could just do that. I also learned it from a friend, because I also am a first gen, and on top of that being international. So, if you can just like level up the challenges. But anyways, I think the other thing also about asking questions is incredibly important. And I think particularly asking from the current, if there are current graduate students in the program, in the specific lab that you're applying to. And something that I kind of misunderstood, like there was also a casual dinner that I shared with these students without the faculty. And I still felt like, I had to prove that I had a place here, and I had to like perform in some sense. And it's actually like, they really don't care in that sense, right? And they just kind of want to get to know you and also give you a more realistic image of what it is like to be a grad student, and especially in that particular lab that they are in, right? So you want to ask questions, and you want to really understand their experience, not like, you don't need to like perform or show how well your experience is, or it's not you who is being evaluated, but you're trying to figure out whether that program is a good fit for you. So I think that's incredibly important. And I think even after, like, I became really good friends with one of my lab mates, but in the beginning I like met her at interview weekend, and I got admitted to the program. And I never asked her about housing, about where to buy furniture and things like that. And I think I could have just saved myself so much trouble if I would have been more free to like reach out and ask questions. And so asking questions at any point, especially with your peers or future peers, is incredibly important.
Kimberly, I got a question that I think actually you will be excellent at answering because you're the guru in this. So do you all have something for McNair students? Can you get a fellowship and assistantship at the same time? So maybe we can generally talk about some available fellowship, especially the internal ones that we have at UT.
Yeah, so at UT specifically, we do have a McNair Fellowship that we will nominate you for. So on the application, when you fill that out, there's a section to designate if you're a McNair Scholar. And we automatically will look at nominating you for that. It's a 1-year fellowship. I do want to point out for those of you who are McNair Scholars, you are eligible to apply for application fee waivers through universities. Our website, our admissions page has a link to the application fee waiver. Most programs will have something like that. If you don't see it, then definitely reach out. McNair scholars are also eligible to get waivers of the GRE application fee. Our program no longer requires the GRE as part of the application process, but there are programs that do still require that. So, so be mindful that that is something that you can apply for. In our program, we don't have a separate application process for that very first year. So we automatically will consider you for any incoming fellowships that you're eligible for. That will vary by program. So again, that's something to look at the website. Some programs will have a separate application if you're interested in being considered for a fellowship. And so that first year, really, we just require the application. And then after that, we send notifications out as fellowships become available. There are a number of departmental, college, and graduate school fellowships here at UT that come out throughout the year. And so we send out notifications for those. When you tend to have the full fellowships, those come with a stipend. I think right now the minimum stipend for the graduate school fellowships is $30,000 for the year, and then it includes full tuition and a supplement to purchase the student insurance. And so they're very nice packages. It's always great when you can be on a fellowship because it gives you the freedom to be able to focus on research and not have to worry about, fitting in teaching assistant responsibilities, that kind of thing. So definitely, if you're not seeing information about funding or you have a question, most programs have someone like me that you can contact and get more information. So definitely reach out to that person. You can also talk with faculty or again with grad students, and those are going to be excellent resources as well.
Okay, so we are at the time mark. Kimberly, is there any other last question that you are dying to address before I shut you guys down?
Just one thing that did kind of jump out at me, and I just kind of wanted to throw it out to the panelists. Someone did ask about, what do you do with a PhD in psychology? And that can really vary. So I just wanted to ask our panelists what their thoughts on what do you do with your degree? What does a job look like as a psychologist?
I could start, and then so there are a lot of options. Psychology is really applicable to a lot of different career paths. So of course, there's the traditional academic path, which I am currently on. So after getting my PhD, I'm interested in staying in academia and maybe getting a faculty job down the road. And so I opted to do a postdoc, which is an additional training opportunity where you get additional, it's kind of an in-between where you get additional training experience, and it makes you more competitive when you do apply for those faculty jobs. The faculty jobs that are available also vary. You can get kind of more of a research position or more of a teaching position. But there are a lot of non-academic traditional academia paths that students pursue. There's industry, there's policy opportunities, research opportunities for private sectors. I have a lot of friends that have gotten jobs with Google, with Facebook. I have friends who are involved in policy, and friends who are pursuing. I have someone who works at the NIH who reviews grants and decides where funding goes. So there's a lot of potential paths. And I have a lot of friends who entered grad school thinking they were going to do one thing, but as they received their training, decided that they were more or less interested in an industry job, in a teaching job, or in the more kind of traditional academic job. But you shouldn't be, this is something also that I feel like if a lot of people enter grad school thinking they're going to do one thing and there's only one path, and there are many paths, so you shouldn't feel compelled to pursue the traditional path or the non-traditional. You should really pursue what's most exciting for you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's pretty much covers everything. I think one thing that's also important is that these 5 years or however many years you spend doing your PhD is kind of trying out these different opportunities as much as you can. So definitely having a teaching position, understanding if you like it, if you're not, because even within academic jobs, there are smaller liberal arts colleges that focus more on teaching, where you have to have more of a teaching profile and you have to be very personable and, you know, talk to a lot of students. And then there's also more urban universities where the focus is on the research and you have to produce a lot of high quality research. So whether that this or that is more of your interest, and something that I've also been kind of interested in, and I'm trying to see if maybe you could get an internship or something in a place like Austin, where there's a huge tech industry and they are looking for even part-time interns, maybe for a summer, to see if that is for you, if that's something that you're interested in. So I think also taking this 5 years as your training for your future job, so kind of getting a taste of what those jobs would be, is another, and this is something where you want to maybe consider location again.
You will be highly marketable. You're getting skills that are going to apply to a lot of different jobs. And so that's a positive.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.